But so look, I just got through watching you all run. And, you know, nobody here runs the same as someone else. Everybody's got their little unique jam that they're doing. And the thing that occurred to me while I was watching you run, while this mind of mine was analyzing with no expression on my face, the interesting thing that came about that I wanted to talk about first was cadence. Because some of you, relative to speed, were influenced in regard to having to turn the legs over quicker to keep up. The consciousness of opening up the stride to maintain pace did not exist. Some of you really sluggish with your cadence. Some of you responded by going too quickly. Your cadence is really fast when you're trying to keep up. If I turned it up to 9 miles an hour instead of 8, you'd have turned your legs over a lot quicker. The problem with that is the expense that's associated with turning your legs over faster. So I almost said enemy, and I don't want to, but on that thread, because that's your consciousness, lactic acid buildup potentially would be the enemy. Lactate is like petting the belly of an alligator. If you're careful, you can make it happen. You could be in a good place. But if you do it wrong, it's going to be a problem. So if you were racing Josh, for example, and you're both running at the same pace, because his consciousness is to keep his cadence appropriate, more efficient, the cost is less. So your pace may be the same, but your expense is greater than his. So he's aware of it. He knows that you're doing the wrong thing. His consciousness strategically is, I'm going to go ahead and push the pace a little bit, maybe sacrifice my cadence a little bit in order to make you work even that much more hard. Even that much more hard. Who says that? Even harder, okay? And then he may lay back a little bit as you start to really gas, and then hit you again. And then hit you again. And then he just starts to approach the finish line. He just lets it go, and you know the expense to go to that garage doesn't matter. Maybe he turns his legs over because he's already exhausted the amount of speed he can create with a standard cadence. Cadence being 180 strides per minute. So when you talk about 180 strides per minute, why? Why 180? Why not 190? Why not 175? Right? So the science, and they've looked at it a lot of different ways, and I've looked at it every way that they've looked at it. And I'm fairly well convinced that almost regardless of what type of race you do, short of 100 meter, 200 meter, 300 meter, you're going to be more efficient. You're going to actually create an appropriate amount of speed if you hold 180 strides. And so the focus is the gait cycle. So the time it takes from the transition of one foot to hit the ground to that foot to come back to the ground again, okay? The further out you reach ahead of your body, the longer it takes for your foot to get back into the gait cycle. So in your case, you have a really slow cadence. You're boom, boom, boom. You're plodding a lot. And so the faster you try to go, the further you'll tend to reach, and the longer it takes for you to get back into the gait cycle. And so essentially what you're doing, because when you're out here like this, in order to correct that overstride, you have to go up. So the further you reach, the higher you have to go up. And so now we got vertical oscillation, this up and down action. And so the game is to go from point A to point B, and you're interrupting that path by wasting time up and down. Plus, the further up you go, the further down you have to travel, the harder you hit the ground. And then it becomes a function of, because you're overstriding, and it almost doesn't matter whether you're landing on your forefoot or you're landing on your heel, that overstriding action is going to result in braking force. So now you're interrupting your forward progress with a braking action. And you are unstable. So if I try to lift this trailing leg right now, it ain't going to work. There's no way I'm going to be able to hold myself up with my foot ahead of my body like this. However, when you're running, because you have momentum, you can momentarily pass over that unstable pillar in order to continue to move. But that moment in time, you're unstable, so you're essentially recovering from a collision. And then it becomes a function of your strength to weight ratio. How much of that can you put up with before it becomes a problem, right? And in some people, that might be a 20-mile week. Some people, it may be a 50-mile week. But I promise you, the collision and the overstriding and the braking adds up to problems somewhere along the connect chain. So, what was the next? Okay, let's talk about this. 4-foot heel, what's the deal, right? Hey, I should write that down someplace. And so, I like to be barefoot when I do this because this is my model, right? When you land, and some people mid-foot, 4-foot, tomato, they're not terribly sure what that's all about, right? And so there's a circumstance that takes place when you engage your 4-foot. And what it requires is that you can dorsiflex your great toe. So that joint needs to function. That's your metatarsophalangeal joint, MPJ1. Okay, first joint. This joint here is the first chain in the reaction of stability. So when you flex this, what ends up happening is the arch fires. So this being contracted, so this is actually dorsiflexion of the foot. I'm sorry, this is plantar flexion, but it's also flexion of the great toe. This is dorsiflexion of the great toe, plantar flexion of the foot. I don't know which one's which. But you can see that I got a contraction going on here, okay? So this contraction is the next step. So we have mobility at the great toe, which is going to cause stability right across this metatarsal bridge, okay? So things start to lock down. And then when my heel touches down, there's two things that happen, right? First of all, mobility, stability. Now mobility is also required at the ankle. But when I'm dorsiflexed, this is something I haven't talked about before. I talked about it yesterday a little bit because it's kind of new on my radar. And this is important for you, by the way. When you have that hinge go into dorsiflexion like this, the ankle stabilizes. And the reason is because if you know anything about your anatomy, you have these little bones, these little cuboids on the front of your foot before the metatarsals, and before that sits the talus, and underneath the talus sits the calcaneus. So this bridge work of bones that make up the foot are held together where the fibula and the tibula set down over like a little harness. It just hooks down on top. When your foot is extended like this on contact, you have no stability in here. This joint is loose. So all kinds of shit can happen. When you land dorsiflex, this whole system locks down and is more stable. So the angle of approach with your foot is important. And I'm looking at you because I can show you in the video, you're still toe diving a little bit.
Oh, am I? Okay.
Yeah, and that toe dive, when you make contact, you're hitting the ground with an unstable foot.
Okay.
And so that can radiate into issues all the way up into the calf. Because you're not stable, you can get a little the navicular wants to drop down on the posterior tibial tendon and the nerve that's associated with that.
Right.
And that hides behind the gastroc and the soleus, and deep down you got some pain that persists and feels like a calf issue, but it's not.
Right.
And it's not coming from your calf. Mm-hmm. So you can work the shit out of your calf hoping to make that go away. But the problem is that every time you hit the ground, you're doing it with a loose joint, and that's what's causing the problem. I have a workout that I do on the treadmill. I call it the treadmill frolic. And that's hopping on one foot for so many repetitions, hopping on the next foot. You cannot overstride. You cannot run badly doing that. Peg legs like that. Peg legs are just more, we're going to do it tomorrow, going up the hills. You're going to hate it. But you're going to start noticing the weaknesses. And I even spoke about this the other day. When we do go up that hill and we do the peg leg workout, you'll right away see the people that had trouble with their ankles in the past because they won't make it up there. They don't have the structural integrity to get up the hill without fault. They might have to stop 3 times before they go up. And then they get down and they're just cussing me, and then they realize, oh shit, I got to do the other leg too, right?